Hello there folks and welcome to Motorcast. My name's Toby and with me today is Nathan Alex to discuss today's Chinese Grand Prix from the Formula 1 2017 season. And today the top two were reversed from Australia and Lewis Hamilton won the race from Sebastian Vettel and Max Verstappen rounded out the podium. And starting straight away with you, Nathan, how did you think the race was today?
Well, from an entertainment perspective, I think it certainly was quite good. Obviously with the whole palaver at the start, about whether to be on the dry tyres or the intermediate tyres. But I think certainly in pretty much every way it was more entertaining than the Australian Grand Prix, which I think people would unanimously agree was a bit dry, more overtaken in this one. So generally I'd say, quite a decent race.
And Alex, would you agree with that? Do you think it was better than Australia?
Yeah, I have to say the new cars seem to work a bit better around China in terms of entertainment. I mean, Australia, the dirty air seemed to have a very, very big effect, but China, especially with the DRS not doing too much, it did lead to a bit more wheel-to-wheel racing, especially with Ricciardo and Vettel, and especially with the rain at the start, it did throw a bit of a spanner into the works, and I thought it was quite decent overall. Yeah,
admittedly, I've never really liked China, but I have to say today it wasn't the worst race I've seen wearing China ever. But let's get into the talking points with the first team of Mercedes. Now, obviously, Alex, Hamilton won, but Bottas spun. If you haven't watched the race, folks, Bottas spun, I think, when they were getting the tyres up to temperature when they're on the dries. And Racing Demon actually asked us for this podcast, do Mercedes, Alex, need to worry about Bottas yet? And is he as good as Rosberg? It's tricky to tell at the moment, but what do you think?
I think after two races, it's quite difficult to tell. I mean, Rosberg, when he won the championship, it was in, his 7th season with Mercedes? So, yeah, I think Bottas is probably still settling into the team. It was only his second race today in, let's say, the fastest car on the grid, along with Ferrari, obviously. But yeah, Australia, he didn't do too bad a job, to be honest. There was a point where he was catching Hamilton, and today he only really made one mistake, and it seemed to cost him quite a lot because of just the way he spun, really, under the safety car. I don't think he's done too badly so far. You've got to remember he is racing against arguably the best driver in Formula 1 at the moment, in Lewis Hamilton. I think if you put Hamilton and Vettel on kind of equal terms, I think Bottas is doing probably a better job in relation to Hamilton than Raikkonen is in relation to Vettel. So I don't think there's a real worry just yet, but we'll have to see how his form carries on from here.
And do you think, Nathan, that Bottas will be worried yet, or do you think he'll be okay? He doesn't tend to notice pressure, does he? He seems quite cool. And do you think he'll be feeling the pressure or not?
No, I don't think so. He's an ice cool Finn. I don't think they do feel pressure. No, but I mean, certainly I felt this, but I think a lot of people felt that that Bottas, was a decent driver, as we saw over the several years he spent at Williams. He was much better than Massa during his time there. And we know that Massa isn't a dreadful driver, and Bottas was the better of the two Williams drivers. So we know he stacks up well against Felipe Massa. I think, it is tough, like Alex said, Bottas is going up against, for his teammate, one of the best drivers on the grid, and it's a new car, a new team. It's going to be tough. Anyway, this race was a slightly, with the damp conditions, it wasn't exactly the easiest race, and there were quite a few people making mistakes. It wasn't just Bottas really, but no, I don't think Bottas can be too concerned just yet. I mean, if this form, finishing 6th place, if that became a regular occurrence, then certainly there's cause for concern. But I think this race, with it being mixed conditions, you can't look at him too harshly for that really. But I think really only time will tell before we can say truly if he's worthy enough to be driving a Mercedes.
And on to Ferrari then. Sebastian Vettel obviously with a P2. Not really much to say about him apart from a fantastic racecraft that we'll move on to in a little bit. But firstly with Ferrari, a bit of controversy at the end of the race with Kimi Raikkonen asking to come into the pits on several occasions. He's tired and completely worn down and he just simply couldn't do anything with them. And I think there was 10 laps to go and they were absolutely gone. So Alex, were the team right or wrong to leave him out as long as they did? Because really, I think it was the cause of the Red Bulls beating him today.
Yeah, I can't really understand why they kept him out so long. I mean, all the other front runners have been in before him because they were all struggling. And it was pretty obvious from the times, really, that Raikkonen was struggling, and you'd think they'd want to try and cover off the Red Bulls. I mean, if you look at the end of the race, Raikkonen was absolutely flying. He was catching the Red Bulls so quickly, especially when Ricciardo caught right to the back of Verstappen at the end of the race. But Yeah, I can't really understand. Even if they put him in maybe 5 or 6 laps earlier, would have given Raikkonen at least a chance of beating the Red Bulls and being on the podium. So, I mean, it's a if but maybe situation, but it definitely put Kimi in a worse position than he would have ended up in.
And do you think, Nathan, is it another muck-up from Ferrari like they've done in previous years, or do you think it was just a bit of an overreaction from Kimi perhaps with the tyres?
It could very easily be an overreaction from Kimi on the tyres, because we saw with the previous Grand Prix, Hamilton was complaining about the tyres, saying he had no grip when the tyres, had a lot of their life left. But I think really, especially, we heard Kimi on the radio, he was getting pretty angry about, not coming into the pits. I think it was kind of a situation where they couldn't really leave him out because Kimi, I don't even know, he was getting furious by the end of it. I don't think they really could have left him out much longer. But it was just a really indecisiveness from Ferrari. If they brought Kimi in earlier, then, he could possibly have beaten both Red Bulls. In the same vein that if they kept him out, maybe the tyres could have gone to the end and he would have stayed ahead of both of them. It was just a case of Ferrari, they made the decision too late, really. If they were going to bring him in, they should have done it earlier, or they should have just kept him out. But, Kimi was kind of, I don't know. It was a case, Kimi, I think if he had it his way, he would have come into the pits several laps beforehand. But, it was just kind of a mistake all around, really, from, Kimi's part and, on the pit wall.
Yeah, and Sebastian Vettel obviously shown some really good racecraft, Alex, and he pulled off a tremendous move on Daniel Ricciardo, and they actually touched tyres, and you could see the smoke coming off, and apparently Vettel took some of the paint off Daniel Ricciardo's tyres. And for me, in terms of overtaking, I'm not a fan of the artificial, your DRS and that sort of thing, and with maybe the KERS in previous years, and the other technologies. I like to see, natural driver-to-driver racing. And Alex, would you agree with that? Do you think it's really good to see drivers actually having their wits against each other and not the fact that it's just their cars?
I think the DRS had a really good effect in this race. I think Martin Brundle touched on it a few times, how it allowed drivers to kind of close up, but it wasn't too powerful that the defending driver, unless you're a McLaren Honda, was always a sitting duck, but it wasn't so weak that it didn't have any effect at all. There was several times where it kind of allowed drivers to close up into the hairpin, allowed them to close up into turn 1, then they kind of set up that pass into turn 6, I think it was, and that created some really good racing, especially that pass from Vettel on Ricciardo. That was fantastic, and it's really refreshing to see, actually, because we haven't seen so much of that in the past, when drivers have just been waiting until the DRS zone to make a simple overtaking move there, where they can't really, the driver in front can't really do anything about it.
Yeah, it's definitely nice to see the DRS have a little effect, but as you say, too much is a bit ridiculous, because like you say, you have to keep to natural racing. I think natural racing is the best form of racing. So on to Red Bull next, and this is another talking point. A brilliant drive by both drivers just to start with, getting 27 points for the team, which will really help them in the Constructors' Championship. But Nathan, I thought this was a really bizarre one about Verstappen moaning about Romain Grosjean and saying that they should get the blue flags out. And I know there's the dirty air and the turbulent air, controversy. But really, do you think... Grosjean was catching up to Esteban Ocon, so he got his own race on. Do you really think that Grosjean should have had to... Well, he didn't have to in the end, but do you think that Grosjean should have pulled over, or do you think, again, like it was with Kimi, perhaps, an overreaction by Verstappen?
Oh, it certainly was an overreaction. Because, I'm not denying that maybe there was an effect from the dirty air, but, the driver in front is meant to yield to the blue flags when they're within a certain distance, and Grosjean was still quite far enough ahead, that it would have cost him a lot to have pulled over at that specific point that Verstappen was moaning about. So it was certainly an overreaction from Verstappen. You can't just because or else in his world he would have just blue flagged every back marker in front of him, because Grosjean was several feet in front. He may as well just blue flagged the leaders. Honestly, it was certainly an overreaction. You can understand where he's coming from. He was coming under pressure from Daniel Ricciardo. Maybe there was an effect from Grosjean's car. There almost certainly was, but the distance was substantial, which the race stewards and the Haas team, they all agreed with. It was too big of a gap to let Grosjean, or to make Grosjean pull over at that point. So it was certainly an overreaction, but I think it was just kind of more the pressure of the moment, kind of spilling over, really.
And do you think, Alex, this actually made Red Bull worry a little bit? Because I know a few people have said, especially Martin Brundle, that Max Verstappen most of the time seems like an old head on young shoulders. But under pressure today, he got a bit flustered and maybe lost his concentration. Is that a bit of a worrying sign to Red Bull? That maybe later in the championship or in future years, if he's going for a championship, then he might get a bit flustered and make a huge mistake, which might even lead to him losing a championship in the future. We don't know.
Yeah, it remains to be seen. I mean, as a general rule, the older you get, the more experience you get, the less he's going to get flustered by that sort of thing. Obviously, it's only he still needs Formula 1. He's still very, very young, so you'd expect that sort of thing, especially in the heat at the moment when he's got his teammate right behind him. He's got two other drivers as well, catching him very, very quickly. So, I mean, I wouldn't say it's too much of a worry at the moment. He'll learn over time, but like you say, the way he might learn is by actually making quite a big mistake when he's kind of under pressure in the lead of the race or something.
Yeah, very interesting. And moving on to Toro Rosso now, Red Bull's sister team or junior team. And first off, I don't know if either of you know, obviously Daniel Kvyat broke down. Do any of you know the source of that? Because it wasn't really covered, really.
Well, looking at the Wikipedia page, it says hydraulics, but...
Right, okay, but Wikipedia's Wikipedia.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't exactly covered at all, really, so... But that's what it says on Wikipedia.
Yeah, but not really an action-packed race for Kvyat at all, kind of at the back, not doing much. But Carlos Sainz, the complete opposite, actually. And he was the only driver, Alex, to go with dries at the start. And he had an absolutely terrible start. He just didn't get away. I think he qualified, I want to say, in the top 10, or just below.
He was in Q3.
Yeah, he was in Q3. But he had a terrible start, and by sort of 200 metres in, he was to the back. But, before the end, he was up to the top 7, and in fact, I was quite surprised that Sky or Channel 4 didn't praise him for this. He did actually follow the top 5 for a long time, and it was quite only a few seconds behind the Ferraris and Red Bulls, but it wasn't really seen to be covered. But a good driver, very good driver, in fact, considering where he started and was at the end of Turn 1 to recover to P7, Alex.
Yeah, that was a fantastic drive from Sainz. I don't think he actually got the praise he deserved there, because he only got passed by Bottas and Raikkonen actually quite late in the race in the end. He was, I think there was actually a point where he was effectively a net P2, but obviously with the pace of the Toro Rosso, he was never going to be able to hold on to that. But that was definitely a very good strategical decision from him, even though at the start it maybe didn't pay off. I think there was actually one clip where he sort of half spun and actually clipped the wall through, I think it might have been Turn 3. He was obviously off at Turn 1 at the start of the race as well, so it looked like it wasn't going to pay off for him. I think he said about how he'll never forget Franz Tost's face at the start of the race when he told him he was going to start on the dries. So Sainz is definitely a driver who's prepared to take a risk. He's clearly quite wise considering he's so young, and I think he's got a very bright future ahead of him. That was a fantastic drive today, yeah.
Yeah, maybe not the correct decision, but at least to have the guts and the balls to go for that. It's certainly a good sign from him. And I don't think that was a stupid decision at all. It was something that it was quite feasible, because there was a clear crossover point, and really nobody knew when the crossover point was, as proved by Bottas spinning. But Nathan, this is a really tough question for you. But seeing Carlos Sainz's performance today, and other performance in his career, and obviously against Verstappen, is Carlos Sainz as good as Verstappen?
I'd say so. I've always thought Sainz is really good, because that's kind of the problem is Sainz has always been considered to be decent, but then there's been Verstappen, who's been the golden boy and breaking age records and all this and that. He's certainly comparable to Verstappen in the same way that Jean-Eric Vergne was comparable to Ricciardo. Sainz is certainly a good driver. It explains the fact why he's still there, because the Toro Rosso program, or the Red Bull Young Driver program, is ruthless, but he's still there. This is his third season?
Third, yeah.
His third season, he's still there, and it proves he is a decent driver. His end result at the end of this Grand Prix, finishing 7th, again proves that, he's a very decent driver in a semi-competitive car. Compared to Verstappen's tough, but at their time at Toro Rosso, which is really the only time you can compare the two, they, in qualifying, they were very similarly matched. In the race, you'd argue that Verstappen was slightly better and slightly more audacious with his overtaking moves, but I think on raw one-lap speed, Sainz is very comparable to Verstappen.
And obviously, Alex, maybe the likes of Williams if Massa goes, McLaren if Alonso goes, and Ferrari if Kimi goes. Carlos Sainz, he'd definitely get a look in at any of those teams, wouldn't he? Because he's certainly got the class. And do you think he'd be a favourite for one or even all of those drives that they came up?
I can't see why not. Yeah, I've always said I don't think Carlos Sainz is any less talented than Max Verstappen. I mean, obviously, I think he is good enough for the Red Bull seat, but obviously they've just got so much young talent, and they've decided to promote Verstappen and the likes of Ricciardo first. Obviously, just the way it's gone. But you never know. There's been talk of Ricciardo perhaps moving to Ferrari, Verstappen moving to Mercedes, that sort of thing. I think naturally, if one of them two does leave Red Bull, he's got to get that seat. But it's a shame, really, because I think he is very, very talented, but his career is going to kind of be depending on what happens elsewhere. I would like to see him get a top drive and be able to challenge regularly for wins and podiums, because I think he is good enough.
Yeah, we've seen it several times, most particularly with Jean-Eric Vergne the last few years. And obviously in my interview, if you haven't watched that with Sam Bird the last few days, he said that Jean-Eric Vergne was better, but actually as good as Daniel Ricciardo. And as Sam said, look where Daniel Ricciardo is now. So it's a shame for Sainz at the moment. But hopefully next season, if his seat does come up, then he'll get that seat. And he's certainly competed with the likes of Perez and Romain Grosjean, but maybe he'll get that seat. But anyway, on to Romain Grosjean's team now, Haas. And a little stat there for you guys. Magnussen with the first points for a driver for Haas, other than Romain Grosjean. But let's be fair, it's not that hard considering Gutierrez was his teammate last season. But a solid performance, Alex, from Magnussen, and the first point of his season. Good foundations from Haas, really, in the first two races.
Yeah, I think he was. He surprised me today, but how well he did. I always saw him as maybe kind of second fiddle to Grosjean, but he did a very, very solid job today. He got the best out of the car, which is something we haven't always seen from him. He's not usually been someone to kind of maximise his result, but 8th place, that's a fantastic result. And Haas are actually looking very, very good. I wouldn't say over one lap pace they're quite so strong, but in the race today, I know Renault had various different problems which we'll get onto, but they did seem to have the measure over them. Magnussen in the end got the better of both Force Indias, and we can't really tell where Williams are yet, obviously after their contrasting races, but Haas do look very, very strong. They're kind of in there with Force India, just going about their business, getting the points on the board early, which is going to be difficult when the likes of Renault do get their act together and start scoring points. It's going to be difficult to catch up, because if they can keep this level of consistency, it will make a massive difference, because we know how tight the midfield battle always is in the constructors. Yeah,
definitely, and probably too early to call, Nathan, but I did say before the season, I mean, a lot of people said that Haas wouldn't be that brilliant this season, and would maybe be struggling at the back with Sauber. And for me, I looked at that lineup and I thought that was a really good lineup, and I actually thought the car would be decent. And I wouldn't say that I've been proven right yet, but I mean, Renault will definitely improve throughout the season. Maybe not Sauber with that year-old engine, and perhaps maybe not McLaren. Where do you see Haas finishing the constructors? I'd probably say 8th. Would you agree?
I think it's Haas. I mean, Haas is quite a strange one, really, because I wasn't expecting a great deal from Haas heading into this season. Because obviously last season they had a lot of development time leading into the season. So I really wasn't expecting a great deal from Haas this season, because they had comparatively less development time. But the pace they've shown has actually been quite good. I mean, even from Magnussen, I know some people were bashing Magnussen after the Australian Grand Prix, but Magnussen's proved, scoring 4 points today, that he's decent overall. And Haas, maybe they could. It's difficult to say. I mean, Magnussen did beat both Force India drivers this Grand Prix, so maybe they could beat Force India, but it's really it is too early to say. But I reckon Haas could certainly exceed my expectations anyway and finish reasonably high up in the constructors' standings.
And where do you think they'll finish, Alex? I bet you don't want them to beat Force India or Renault by any chance, do you?
Well, I think being such a new team, I think they will struggle with the development as the season goes on, but they have surprised me so far, I have to say. They've done very, very well so far. I think it'll be interesting to see what they can do in comparison to Renault, who obviously Hulkenberg things just didn't go his way today. It would have been interesting to see where the Haas would have ended up in comparison to him, but in all honesty, I can't see them beating Force India this season, simply because Force India have just been here so many times. They've got a lot more backing now. They've always been quite good with their development, even if they're always kind of consistently quick for one half of the season. Force India do seem to always really get their act together quite a lot of the time, and I can't really see Haas ever moving up from this sort of position. Not this season anyway, but maybe if they could challenge for a top 6 or 7 in the constructors, that would be certainly a step forward.
Very interesting. You talking about Hulkenberg there. Let's talk about the dirty driver himself. With 15 seconds worth of penalties, I don't know what the hell happened there. But he overtook under both virtual safety car and safety car. Jolyon Palmer just behind him, Nathan. Not a great day for Renault, was it today? Pretty bland race for them, but some weird penalties for Hulkenberg, who's not usually known for being that way inclined, and it seems a bit bizarre, doesn't it?
Yeah, very bizarre. I really don't know how much I can say, to be honest, because I cannot remember anything about Renault this Grand Prix. It was just quite anonymous, quite drab. Pretty much the most significant thing any Renault driver did this Grand Prix was the penalties, really, that Hulkenberg accrued. No, it really wasn't anything amazing from them. You suspect, with the power disadvantage they've got with their power units, that this would be one of their weaker tracks. And it certainly proved to be that way. We would expect Renault to be finishing in the points on a fairly regular basis this season. But no, I really don't know how much I can say, really. They didn't really do a great deal. 12th and 13th. I think this will be one of their worst Grand Prix of the season.
And interesting. I think there's not really much to discuss with Renault, so we'll move straight on to their competitors, Force India. And I'll ask Alex this one. There's really not much to ask about Force India. But double points, much like Australia, and good foundation for them this season to get their hopeful 4th, as their team principal Vijay Mallya wants to see. Maybe challenging the top 3, but top 3's a bit far, isn't it, Alex?
Yeah, that midfield battle is going to be huge this season, as we've already touched on. Force India, Haas, Toro Rosso, Renault, Williams, obviously, as well. I doubt we'll see McLaren in there, but it's going to be so tight this season, even more so than last season. One thing we often see with Force India, I already touched on this, but they're always very, very good one half of the season, and the other half, they're always kind of terrible. So last season, we saw them start very, very slowly, and although they did get a fantastic finish in the end, they did have quite a bit of ground to make up. But this season, they've shown already signs of consistency, obviously double points in both races so far, and I think that's what they're really going to need if they want to get above that. These kind of 1 or 2 points each race, it's going to make a huge difference come the end of the season, because it's going to be so tight in there.
And someone who hasn't shown consistency so far, maybe no fault of his own, is Lance Stroll for Williams, and that's why Massa's really struggled to pick up the points. He did pick up was it 8 points in Australia? He finished 6th?
Yeah, 6th, yeah.
Yeah, he finished 6th, so that's a good solid amount of points. But of a disaster for Stroll, and Nathan, I'll ask you this one. He was obviously hit by Perez on the first lap. Who was at fault for that one? It seemed that kind of Stroll did. They were side by side. It did seem that Stroll kind of turned it on him a little bit. What do you think? I don't know, but what do you think?
I think Martin Brundle, he summed it up in the commentary when it was broadcast on Sky. I think it was a racing incident, really. Because Stroll left him the space, because I think it was that double left-hander sequence, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And Stroll, because you could see on board from Perez, Stroll left him the room, but at some point Stroll had to turn into the corner. And so, it's especially difficult, obviously, with, kind of damp conditions, so the tyres weren't up to temperature. You don't quite know how much grip all of the different parts of the track have, depending on, how wet they all are. Personally, if you had to blame someone, I'd probably blame Perez, because he wasn't that far alongside Stroll, really, but Stroll could have seen Perez coming, but at the same time, Perez could have backed out, really. It was a racing incident, but if I had to blame someone, I'd just blame Perez.
Very interesting there. Not really much to talk about with Williams. Massa didn't have a good day at the office, and nor did Stroll, obviously, crashing out on the first lap. But McLaren, on to McLaren next, and both drivers had technical problems now. Typical McLaren, this isn't it? Fernando Alonso running really well and, driving like an animal, as he describes it, Alex. How disappointed must he be to have been running in 7th, just behind Carlos Sainz, I believe, and then the car just knackers up, really. That's the only real word I could use, and it completely just stops. And the same for Van Dorn, really. The two drivers just got to, I'm sure the team will as well, but the drivers who are actually out there driving the car, and the mechanics as well, obviously, who work so hard on the cars, do you think they'll be really disappointed? They'll be definitely disappointed with that. There's actually no question about that. But Alex, do you think there's a worry for the team and obviously haven't scored along with Sauber and Renault. Do you think there'll be worry for them who haven't actually scored yet in the first 2 races?
I think McLaren, especially Alonso, must be absolutely devastated because I think he has really driven so well in the first 2 races. If the car hadn't kind of had technical issues in both races, he could have scored points so far in possibly Australia, depending on if he'd managed to hold on to 10th. Definitely today, though. He has been fantastic so far this season. I don't think Van Dorn's really done a bad job. He's just not been able to show anything yet because of the car simply being so unreliable and Alonso just being so experienced and so good. He's obviously had about 15 years more than Van Dorn in F1, so it's always going to show. But Alonso, I can't really see what much more he can do because in the first 2 races he has shown why he's a double world champion, definitely. But unfortunately, the cars failed him both times. So, and it's been the story of McLaren really for the past, well, at least for the hybrid era, definitely. And it's got to be a real worry.
He said he'd never quit. Yeah, he said he'd never quit mid-season, Fernando, which is fair enough to him. And I'm sure he'll see out this season, but maybe after this season he might leave it there. But not great to go out on that. But our last team then, Sauber, Nathan, and a nasty crash for Giovinazzi, pretty much in the same place in qualifying and the race. And a few people on Twitter said, well, people remember Giovinazzi now for, his crash is not necessarily for the good work he did in Australia. But, I don't know about you, but I think I remember him for the good work he did in Australia, because he did a fantastic drive in Australia, no doubt about that, considering he'd only had FP3 in qualifying before the race.
Oh yeah, I mean, I certainly remember Giovinazzi for the good result. I mean, as I touched on earlier, I mean, with this being a mixable, changeable conditions race, it's quite difficult to really pinpoint a driver who performed badly and one who performed well, because with the conditions being so tricky. I mean, at the start, when Giovinazzi crashed, there were several dry tyre runners who were going on all over the place. So, Giovinazzi crashed. 30 seconds later, if he hadn't crashed, someone else might have done. Because just up the road, Ericsson, went wide around the final corner just before Giovinazzi went off. So, honestly, it'd be someone very fickle to look at Giovinazzi's crash and say that he's dreadful, really. No, really, you can't judge someone too harshly for a race like this. Certainly, it was a fantastic result in Australia, and certainly, personally, at the very least, I'm certainly going to remember him as a decent driver.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and Giovinazzi in Australia did a fantastic job. Alex, the crucial question is obviously Ericsson had a bland race there. But the question is, will Verline be back in Bahrain, or will this incredible saga, continue with him?
Well, I think it's quite hard to tell. I don't think Giovinazzi's performances over the first 2 races are really going to have much of an influence on that. I'm not an expert, obviously, when it comes to whatever Verline's got wrong with him, but I think that will be determined by how fit he is, really, and how ready he is to go racing in Bahrain, because we've seen Giovinazzi, obviously he can't have had that much preparation over the winter. Obviously he'll have been preparing himself for a test driver role, but considering he was thrown straight into the deep end on the first Friday in Australia, I can't see why Verline can't come back for Bahrain, in all honesty, as long as he's not got anything too drastically wrong with him.
Yeah, I think he did have the one-day testing in Catalonia, but then again, 1 day is nothing compared to Verline and Ericsson's, 1 year or 2 year or maybe 3 years or 4 years. But that pretty much rounds up our Chinese Grand Prix review. Just going quickly now for a Bahrain GP preview before we round up. And Nathan, I'll give you a few seconds to think. I want your top 3 for the Bahrain Grand Prix. Well, the Kimi-drome, we should call it, because Kimi's done fantastically around there the last few years. I want your top 3. Who's going to set the fastest lap and who's going to get pole position?
Okay, top 3. I'll still say Hamilton first, Vettel second. Third place, I'll go with Bottas, really, just to be unimaginative. But, it could easily be Vettel in first, really. But I'll still go Hamilton first, Vettel second, Bottas third. Pole position, again, I'll go with Hamilton. And then, what was the other thing? Fastest lap?
Yeah.
Fastest lap could be anyone, really, because it's just who fits on the softest tyres at the end. Fastest lap, I'll say Kimi Räikkönen.
Interesting, so that's the only accolade that Nathan thinks Kimi will get at the Kimi-drome. How do you think Kimi will get on the Kimi-drome? Alex is blimey, a lot of Kimis there.
I think, it's going to be between Hamilton and Vettel again, I would have thought. I think Hamilton will win in Bahrain. He's been very, very quick around there in the past. It's the sort of track he really tends to like. So I'm going to say Hamilton first, Vettel second. I'm going to go with Bottas third again. Pole Hamilton.
And pole and fastest lap?
Pole Hamilton, yeah. Fastest lap, Vettel, I think.
Very interesting. So that's your mini preview for the Bahrain Grand Prix. And that's pretty much it for today's Chinese Grand Prix review. If you enjoyed that with myself, Nathan and Alex, thank you very much to you two for coming on first off. But if you enjoyed that, folks, remember to like and leave your comments and thoughts. I'm sure we can have a nice discussion in the comments if you wish to do that about the Grand Prix today and maybe the future, anything we've touched on and discussed today. But if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure to do that for more Formula 1 podcasts, MotoGP, Formula E, WC, WRC, WRX, BTCC, Formula 2 and GP3, and that just shows the plethora of content that we cover. So it's more than worth subscribing to us. Remember, it is free of charge. You only do this for fun, for your viewing pleasure, and none for us whatsoever. But if you did enjoy that, folks, maybe just leave a comment, like, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done already. I've been Toby. These two have been fantastic analysts for me today, and we'll see you for the Bahrain GP review in about a week's time. So we'll see you then.